Hello friends, welcome to the program. Come on in, kick off your shoes, and plop your ass down, because today we're going to be going back to the year 1987, and if you're a fellow 80s kid, you may have stumbled across this classic little gem from way back when, the Amblin Entertainment sci-fi comedy drama,
Batteries not included.
a whimsical story centered around the quirky residents of a rundown New York apartment building that's in danger of being torn down by a shady real estate developer. Now, to me, this movie was an instant classic. It had lots of charm and plenty of heart. It was written and directed by Matthew Robbins, who not only directed such films such as Corvette Summer with Mark Hamill and also The Legend of Billie Jean, but he's also an accomplished screenwriter, penning such films as Mimic, Crimson Peak, and Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Now at this point you're probably asking yourself, what the hell was the deal with that whole Amazing Stories intro at the beginning, and what the hell does it have to do with this video? Well, if you'll calm your tits, I'll tell you. You see, apparently Batteries Not Included was originally intended to be an episode of the popular television show Amazing Stories. However, executive producer Steven Spielberg liked the story so much that he decided to turn it into a full-fledged motion picture, boasting an incredible cast including Dennis Boutsikaris, who I'm sure all of you recognize as the lovable Dr. Weissman in the hit comedy classic The Dream Team. Former defensive tackle for the Chicago Bears turned veteran actor Frank Mcrae, who was famous in his day for not only playing a variety of angry, shouty police captains,
You Winston McCop, you lost a stolen bus! I got 5 deaths related to Gemz, and you blow it for a lousy convict! That's right, I call him a you better idea!
but also for his portrayal of Spanky in the 90-minute-long Nintendo commercial, The Wizard. Also starring Elizabeth Pena and Michael Carmine, as well as the real-life husband and wife duo Hume Cronyn and Jessica Tandy, who had recently starred together in another classic sci-fi dramedy, Cocoon. As of now, Batteries Not Included stands at 67% on Rotten Tomatoes, and though the critics may have had mixed reviews of the film over the years, to me it'll always stand as a real gem. So what do you say we get into it? The movie starts off with some old-timey photos of Hume Cronyn and Jessica Tandy and the cafe that they run inside their tiny apartment building. We then go to Faye, played by Jessica Tandy, who's wandering around the nicer parts of New York before arriving at this tiny hole-in-the-wall diner inside an apartment building where she's greeted by her husband Frank, played by the always lovable Hume Cronyn.
Ah, you got a lot of nerve. Get your food somewhere else.
And right off the bat we can tell that Faye isn't exactly playing with a full deck.
Is it Sunday? Monday and Tuesday don't smell at all because cream of wheat is instant. And it ain't Thursday. I can smell Thursday all the way back to Wednesday when people put the garbage out.
Meanwhile, several tenants of the building are getting harassed by these punks in an attempt to get them to move out.
She doesn't believe me. You can move to Brooklyn.
Yeah. Buy yourself a new Saint. You can afford it now.
You know, it's a shame that there are parts of the world where people aren't even safe in their own homes without having to worry about some punk showing up at your door trying to give you a bunch of free money. I don't know what this world is coming to. But the tenants don't want the money, nor do they want to move out, so the leader of the punks, Carlos, decides to trash the joint. Frank then calls the cops, but they tell him tough titties, there's nothing they can do.
Then patrol the neighborhood for crying out loud.
What neighborhood?
And just then, another tenant, a starving artist named Mason, arrives with a lady from the Historic Preservation Society who isn't too thrilled with the shithole apartment building that Mason wants to have preserved.
There's nothing left here to preserve.
Well, this one's still here, and it can be saved. It can be restored.
We do have a minimum standard.
That the structure is intact and livable. You don't even have that.
People live here.
Not for long.
Inside Mason's apartment, his girlfriend, Wendy Shaw, quickly dumps his ass and moves out, although her reasons are understandable.
You never once asked to paint me nude!
And then two of Frank's old friends then decide to move out of the building as well as the city so they can live life anew in a land of both magic and wonder.
We're going to Jersey.
Stressed out with having to deal with scumbags and the fact that his wife is mentally deteriorating, Frank momentarily loses his shit before praying for a miracle.
Please. Somebody. Help us.
And just then, his miracle arrives in the form of two adorable little spaceships who are quickly discovered by Faye while trying to have a threesome with a toaster.
Where's a goddamn toaster?
Trust me, Frank, you don't want it back. Dirty, dirty toaster. The next morning, several of the tenants start freaking out after finding out that all their stuff that Carlos broke had been magically repaired.
Someone was in my room.
Yeah, me too. I think we got elves.
You know, it's bad enough when people keep constantly trying to give you free money, but now when you get people breaking into your house in the middle of the night to fix your shit, the world really is truly going to hell. The residents then go to the roof where Faye is scattering nuts and bolts like she's feeding pigeons. They then find several of their items in a shack and accuse Faye of not only being batshit, but also of being a thief. And though she may be batshit, she sure as hell is no thief.
You went into these people's apartments?
Not me, them. The little guy.
Mason then goes into the shack and gets a rather shocking surprise. Faye then takes Frank's pocket watch and smashes the shit out of it to Frank's horror. But just then, the spaceships pop out and quickly get to work fixing the watch. They then go to the diner where everything is as good as new. Later that day, Carlos shows up and is devastated to see the diner repaired after all that hard work he put into trashing the place. Realizing that some weird shit's going down, Carlos decides to investigate and he ends up getting more than he bargained for.
A double pleasure's waiting for you. A double pleasure from Double Mint Gum. A double great feeling, making you realize double is the one for you. Double fresh, double smooth, double delicious to chew. A double pleasure is waiting for you. Double Mint Gum. A double pleasure is waiting for you.
Alright, so I'm going to warn you right now, the following part gets a little graphic, so you may want to have the children leave the room. So later that night on the rooftop, the spaceships start going apeshit, chasing each other around the rooftops before making their way to the shack, where they then proceed to make some of that sweet, sweet, hot and sweaty love. Shortly after, the apartment building starts doing some weird poltergeist shit with the lights because one of the spaceships is draining the electricity because the other spaceship forgot to pull out, and now they're going to have some babies in some crappy little shack while a bunch of weirdos stand there gawking at them. However, one of the babies doesn't make it.
Batteries not included.
The next day, the residents have a funeral for the dead baby spaceship, but one of the tenants, a former boxer named Harry, decides that he wants to keep the corpse for himself, and he does some stealthy grave robbing.
Hey, what you doing? Where you going? Stop him! What is it? Champ, what are you doing?
In his apartment, Harry starts doing some Mr. Wizard shit with the dead baby ship. Meanwhile, Frank reopens his diner with some help from his new employees. And then we get another cheerful visit from our good pal Carlos. But Faye, however, keeps confusing Carlos for her dead son Bobby, and Carlos is starting to get really fed up with it.
Come on, lady, you gotta stop it.
Meanwhile, Harry is busy desecrating a corpse before flushing it down a sink. But then, miraculously, the baby spaceship comes to life and climbs its way out of the toilet. We then go to a pointless subplot where Mason's trying to hook up with his pregnant neighbor Marissa, and we soon find out that she's been collecting his paintings that he had previously thrown away. Carlos then goes back to visit his boss, the shady real estate developer Mr. Lacey, because Carlos is worried about losing his entry-level position within the company as a hired thug. But Lacey gives him one more chance to get rid of the tenants, or else it's back to the mailroom.
Don't you worry, Mr. Lacey. I'm gonna do it for you.
Back at the apartment building, the mother spaceship experiences severe postpartum depression and attempts neonaticide, which I just learned is an actual term. And just then, the resurrected baby spaceship shows up to save the day.
It's the little fella, alive and kicking.
A drunken Mason then shows up to spoil the mood because he's pissy that Marissa's baby daddy Hector showed up, and now Mason can't score because all of a sudden some scumbag decides that he wants to be there for the woman who's carrying his child. But Marissa comes to her senses and decides to kick Hector to the curb so she can continue her relationship with this dirt-poor drunkard instead of with the actual father of her child. Down in the basement, Carlos is being his usual rascal self, but this time he goes too far. And big ol' Harry, well, he is just not having it.
I'll take door number 1.
Later that night, while the residents are out trying to find a way to save the dying spaceship, one of Lacey's goons pays a visit to the apartment building with some gasoline. The mommy ship succeeds in fixing the daddy ship, and the two set off to collect their children before moving out of the city because New York is clearly no place to raise a family. Back in the basement, Lacey's goon is joined by Carlos, and the two proceed to set fire to the joint before realizing that Faye is still in the building.
Bobby, you let him go and get up here this instant.
But Lacey's goon doesn't give a shit and he bounces. But Carlos doesn't really want to have an old lady's death on his conscience, so he goes up to save her. But first, he decides to do some creepy role-playing.
Gee whiz, Mom. I'm sorry. I just wanted to show you something.
The residents return to find their home in ruin just as Faye is wheeled into an ambulance.
Hey, you all right? She all right? She all right? Hey, get back on the side. I'm going along. I'm her husband.
The next night, Harry and his dog are sitting in the rubble of the building when they're suddenly joined by some unexpected visitors. And in the following morning, the other residents return home to see their building completely rebuilt and better than ever, thanks to their newfound friends.
The molding's released. It's perfect.
And a defeated Lacey then decides to leave the apartment building and its quirky tenants alone and just build around them, so everybody wins in the end. And that was Batteries Not Included, and for a film that was originally meant to be just a random episode of some anthology TV show, it did fairly well at the box office, debuting at number 4 and earning $65 million off a $25 million budget. And in the awards section, it did manage to win 2 Saturn Awards, one for Best Fantasy Film and one for Best Actress with Jessica Tandy. Film critic Roger Ebert praised the film, saying it had a lot of good feeling in it. However, Pissy Pants Gene Siskel disagreed, accusing the film of having forced warmth, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. Anyway, I suggest to you that you go out right now and find yourself a copy today and judge for yourself, and who knows, you may just find it to be a real gem. So until next time, folks, this is me to you, reminding you to have your pets spayed or neutered, and always keep it real. Bye-bye.